let's talk about your theory, your feelings, your thoughts on, when you're teaching an SDR, how to
Mhm.
follow up and why to follow up. Where do you start?
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of the most important topics in sales. I think when I was coming up kind of through the ranks, one of the things that stood out to me is like follow-ups was one of those topics that everyone said you had to do. And I heard like statistics around it, but the how part I felt like was like always missing. And so it was like, oh, follow-ups are these important things that you need to do, and 18 touches on a cadence or like whatever. And I was like, wow, that's crazy. But like help me actually like show me how to actually do that in what circumstances, like what needs to be done. I can remember going way back to like when I was first, setting opportunities. We didn't even call it an SDR; we called it lead gen,
Mhm.
and I would just
You
go
that
through.
guy.
Yeah, right. We well, we did call it SDR, and then I would go through the notes, right? And there's different types of sales, right? Like there's more maybe transactional, maybe there's enterprise, maybe there's mid market. Like everyone's selling a different product to a different segment than someone else. So you have to take those things into consideration. In this particular instance, I was selling to accountants. So it was a little bit more transactional. And so you had like lots of gatekeepers, especially around like tax season or even like anytime really. And so I would look at like the call notes, right? If I was cold calling, we can talk about email as well, but focusing on that one channel. And I would always like notice there was like a lack of information and like a lack of like really driving enough effort. And I kind of tucked that away and I said, okay, I cold call, I get a piece of information from the receptionist that was not in the notes of the 20 other people that cold call this. Right. And
Mhm.
so I say, I learned the influencer's name or the decision maker's name. Like we were really big on this type of language back then. And I write it down. So simple, but like that little piece of work. Then I follow up. I ask for the person. I ask again. I ask again. And so I tell this story because it opened up my mind to like, what does this follow up mean and why is it important to me? And
Mhm.
eventually I had done so much work figuring out many more details than just like their name and things like that. But when they would be in the office, why maybe they haven't moved forward with us before, and things like that. And I would try to correct whatever that reason was. And then eventually I got to the place where there were days where I'd book a large amount of opportunities, and the majority of them would come from my follow-ups.
Mhm.
And so this was like a precursor to how we at Chili Piper that many years later would end up like I worked with the CEO to come up with a lot of the sales like training. He was like really into it. I was really into it. And so we would kind of bounce ideas off of each other. And one of the things that we taught to the team was this idea of like a micro theory. And a micro theory is applied to why you reach out to someone originally, but also for why you don't, or excuse me, why you do a follow-up. So for example, in that scenario where 20 people called, and it essentially had like no notes other than like you had called a bunch of times. Maybe it's something as simple as like getting that person's name, correcting any misinformation you did have, and really like honestly grabbing this account and driving it to as far as you can possibly go. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to get the deal right now, but like try to take it as far as you can. And sometimes that means getting more information than other people have gotten before. And sometimes that is your win. That's the accomplishment, is the progression piece. I think like a lot of times when I get prospected, it feels like ready to buy it, ready to buy it, ready to buy it. I'm like, no, as a buyer, there's so many other things that need to happen before I buy. Right.
Mhm.
And so it's okay to have these like micro little wins, and then maybe you get the bulk of your opportunities from follow-ups because you really put the work in. I'm sort
Mhm.
of in building a company right now. I'm going through all this all over again, and the companies that are working with me now are the people that I started conversations with a long time ago, even on a prospecting level, not even on a deal acceleration level. So it is
Mhm.
absolutely essential to nail this follow-up skill. in a much more specific and dynamic way than your peers are, right? To your point about being prospected by an SDR, if it's just like given up upon, oh, I did my 25-step cadence with really, no thoughts or anything behind it, it's going to be really hard to get like sustainable results. And we can talk about the strategies around multi-threading and multi-channel and things like that as well. But you have to start at the highest level, which is like, what is the thing that was not done previously that you're going to do differently, and you're going to correct that. A lot of times it stems from acquiring proper information to gradually, progress the deal. And it's kind of like a snowball effect. Maybe you start, slow, and you can allow it to accelerate. People are also at different points in their buyer journey. In sales, where we're often taught, what's the sales process? Get people to go down your sales process. If you're not aware of your buyer's journey and where they are in their buying process, and that concept isn't clear to you in 2023, it becomes really hard, for you to build those sales skills.
Totally. I wanted to shine a light on something that I think that you said, that I don't think maybe we can just spend a little bit more time talking about the thought process there. You mentioned that you were making, every time you follow up, you're taking notes,
Mhm.
and you're thinking through, okay, what do I do next? This seems like I had two thoughts. I was like, one, this is the opposite of how I used to prospect when I was younger. I was in mindless cog in a machine mode, and I'm just
Mhm.
crushing my tasks. I don't want to do the cold calls, but I'm doing them because I know they're good for me.
Yeah.
So I'm just going through and I'm like, I hit my call task, I move on to the next one. I hit my call
Yeah.
task. It
Uh-huh.
sounds like what you're doing is like a small research step, so that every time you hit a call task or a follow up task, you are building that account somehow. Can you elaborate on what you're doing there?
Yeah, this was absolutely essential. And when I became a closer, I kept this strategy with me, and it's what enabled me to rise above everyone else and closing capacity as well, because I'd get all these marketing and SDR leads. I would close those, and then, oh, by the way, I have this really efficient system that I can
Mhm.
walk away from and not take that stress with me at home. I can come back to it, and guess what? That system is still there at work. And until I built that system, sales was stressful to me. And once I put that system in place, it felt much more sustainable. And that was massive for me as a closer as well. And it was absolutely instrumental to me, like taking home those, $20,000 commission checks and things like that. It started with a follow-up.
Mhm.
So if you kind of like think, I kind of think of like follow-ups as my own way to warm up my leads, right? Like if everything is cold to you today, like you can your maybe your initial outreach, you can take something that is cold, and the whole idea with it is you want to do this warm up process to it, right? It is really hard to just cold call a bunch of things. And if you hope that everyone converts on your cold call without any sort of follow up, it's going to be really hard. And I noticed that's what everyone was doing not everyone, but most of the people on the sales floor were doing. And so I was saying, like, how do I get out of this cold call and try to make them warmer? Right. And so even like, I've called somebody so many times where she knew my name, and we would joke about it. And I said, what do I need to do to talk to the accountant? Maybe I was calling legal a different day.
Yeah.
And so, also just like learning the industry, right? Like a lot of times we learn our product and try to fit everyone into that. But when you learn the landscape and lingo, this helps with your follow-up as well, right? Their
Mhm.
schedules, when they're really busy, like what their preferences are. That level of understanding helps you as well. So the notes were that you asked me about were my way to keep it warm and tell my future self what to do in a very specific and contextual way. So if you think about like the book Atomic Habits, I think every SDR should read that, because it talks about the system creation as well. There's a part of the book where it's like, if you're trying to work out, you can't just say, oh, I want to work out more. You're much more likely to follow through with it if you're like, well, where am I going to do it? When am I going to do it? Who am I going to do it with? Like, that level of specificity. But when we take our notes and do our follow-ups, a lot of times people don't do that. Like for me, when I'm prospecting, I know there's a lot of debate around this, but like inbox zero, I have to have that, because if I don't have do inbox zero, things fall through the cracks and they go missing. So I need my folders organized and I clear it out at the end of every single day. And if I don't do that, I just can't, it doesn't fit my system. And I need that system to help me be productive. And really what I'm trying to do is warm up my leads through, or my accounts or my contacts through my diligent follow-up process. And a huge part of that is note taking, not just telling my future self what to do, but also like what to say, like, hey, this is what we spoke about. And it doesn't have to be anything longer, but when you put more work in like that, it does pay off, and it pays off significantly, right? There's people I'm prospecting right now that I had no idea, they had no idea who I was a year ago, right? Or maybe even less than that, right? But I'm constantly in this like follow-up. And a follow-up, by the way, sometimes we think follow-up is always in ask mode, ready to buy, 15-minute call, give me a demo. Like everyone is saying those things. You don't always have to follow up with an ask. And in fact, you shouldn't. So if you always have an ask for someone, then you're just another salesperson to them, right? You have to figure out how to get in this area of warmth, and follow-ups are an excellent way to do that.